To the Monash information session, the grad certificate on public art. I'm aware of the time, so we will get started to keep everyone on time. So thank you again for joining us and welcome to the information session on the graduate certificate in public art. So my name is Scott. I am from the Faculty of Art Design and Architecture. So I'm here to do the techie stuff this evening, and my colleague Erin, who's behind the scenes, is here to help me make sure that everything runs smoothly. So our talk will begin shortly, but first I'll just go through a couple of quick housekeeping items. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll just do a quick sound check. So if you can just indicate that you can hear me and see the screen by clicking the thumbs up icon, which is located in the reactions tab, and that's just in the bottom toolbar of your Zoom screen. Fantastic, a few hands are going up there, which is good. Let's just have a look. All right, so during this talk tonight, again, thank you for joining us. If you've got a question, please feel free to type it into the chat, which again is located along the toolbar at the base of your Zoom screen. We'll collate these questions and then we'll answer them towards the end in a Q&A session. Let's begin with an acknowledgement to country. So we acknowledge the Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples and communities as the traditional custodians of the land that we work on. At the Faculty of Art Design and Architecture, we acknowledge the Aboriginal connection to material and the creative practice on these lands for more than 60,000 years and celebrate their enduring presence and knowledge. Tonight's graduate certificate in public art will be presented by Monash University's Professor of Fine Art and Australian artist, Callum Morton. So Callum is also Director of Monash Art Projects, or MAP as it's more formally known as, and students who will study the graduate certificate in public art will have the opportunity to work closely with the Monash Art Projects unit or collaborative studio to be able to explore current and past projects. So please enjoy this information session and I will hand over to Callum. Thank you to those that have just joined in to attend. Over to you, Callum.
Thanks, Scott. Can everyone see that one single image? Scott, can you see that?
That's one single image and it looks amazing.
Thank you, Scott. So welcome everyone and thank you for your interest in this exciting new course at MARTA, Monash Art Design and Architecture. It's been in development for a number of years. As Scott said, I am Professor of Fine Art here and also Director of Monash Art Projects, which is one of the research labs at MARTA that specialises in both the conception and production of temporary and permanent public art projects, as well as general research and dissemination of public art practice. And indeed, this course is going to be run out of MAP, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the projects we have in MAP. I'm going to give you a fair amount of context tonight, and then and talk more at the end, more specifically about the course. Feel free to drop in some questions into the chat at any time if you like, and we'll get to your questions. Let me just move to the next slide. You know, for those who don't know Monash, obviously Monash is, you know, the largest university in the Southern Hemisphere. It's got like 78,000 students, which is an enormous university. It's number 6 ranked in architecture in Australia, which is pretty amazing for a small course that started only 10 years ago. It is the, you know, Monash is obviously ranked in the top 1% of universities worldwide. And we're also in the top 10 in Australia and 50 in the world in art and design. In fine art, we're, you know, this Monash Art Projects is linked to fine art, even though we work across the faculty, obviously with practice going public art practice. But in fine art, in undergraduate and graduate programs, we have a significant curatorial program. So there might be some curatorial and curators joining us tonight. So we have a kind of undergraduate through to the only curatorial based PhD in the country. We're also the #1 ranked art school in the country for research, according to the ERA rankings. And I can talk a little bit more about why that is with the kind of eminent artists that we have that work here at Monash. So I'll talk a little bit you know, at MARTA, we're a creative community. We're the kind of creative community of the university. We've been an art and design school here on Caulfield, the Caulfield campus where we're based, for almost 100 years. In fact, next year obviously is our centenary. We have a long and rich engagement with creative practice. We're also an internationally linked networked university with a range of international partners and campuses on 4 continents, as well as the 4 campuses we have in Melbourne. And we think we're producing some of the most significant artists and designers working in the world today. A little bit more about Caulfield. Last 10 years has seen it undergo significant development in the last 10 years. In fact, the precinct is undergoing enormous, as you might be aware, enormous redevelopment with the Caulfield Racecourse and in and around Caulfield more broadly. The library's been John Wardle Architects, very fine architects who've done quite a lot of work out at Clayton as well. Did a refit of the old library there, and it's a brilliant award-winning building. We've got new galleries, new workshops, breakout spaces, cafes, and so on. So the actual environment and atmosphere of Caulfield campus, you know, once you're inside it, is a very fantastic place to be. More of the same. So just in terms of what facilities and technical workshops there are as part of the you know, recent redevelopments at MARTA and Caulfield, we've installed new technology labs to sit alongside the older production labs, older workshops, I should say. So we've got large format printing, got many 3D printers, laser cutters, digital media studios. We've got CNC machines, film editing and green screen facilities, and so on. And then the old workshops, you know, we've got the beautiful glass facility up high in the building that I'm sitting, on the roof of the building that I'm sitting in now. We've got sculpture workshops, painting and drawing spaces, photography studios and dark rooms, great old printmaking studio, and so on. At the centre of the campus, the kind of jewel in the crown, if you like, of the creative precinct is Monash University Museum of Art, or MUMA, which as well as having, and I can talk a bit more about it later, and MAP and the art school work closely with MUMA on a number of, and in a number of ways. They have a very significant program of international and national artists, but they also have, and they have an extraordinary collection of Australian contemporary art, which they began in the 60s. Has over 3,000 objects in it, perhaps more now. But they also have a very significant public art program of permanent and temporary works. We've worked with them on projects. We've worked with them on a symposium called Let's Go Outside, which we're publishing a book on at the moment. And the public art program they run is really one of the leading programs of its type in the country, and public art has proliferated across these campuses, which is just another reason why we're a good fit for this. There's also other galleries. There's the MARTA Gallery, where the student largely shows, it has a program of a program of curated exhibitions, but it largely shows PhD and master students' work. We have the Intermission Gallery, which is student-run, experimental space. Those new facilities were designed by NMBW architects, who any architects on board would know. So there's very good architects that have really thought about the environment and the kind of spatial complexity of where we are and how we can kind of intermingle and collaborate. Some of our alumni from fine arts, Alex Martinez Rowe is a terrific artist. I mean, artists that actually deal with kind of public in a really complex way. Her around kind of feminism. She's a senior lecturer and head of drawing at BCA. Joseph Griffith, who was a master student of mine, did a master's looking at fountains and water in particular. He did these fantastic sort of pirate or guerrilla fountains in and around Melbourne. Paul Yaw is an artist many of you might know as well. So just to get to what is public art, it's a very big question. to kind of tackle, and something we will tackle in complex ways in the course. But of course, all art was public in the beginning, right? So you think of, you know, Homo sapien cave paintings and symbolic objects 70,000 years ago. You know, art wasn't really in the private sphere until the ancient Chinese, ancient Greeks, maybe 3,000 years ago. And so the notion of public art is a very complex one. It's contested and it's diffuse, you know, as indeed is the notion of privacy. We all know this. So you just think about the rise of the internet and how that has become the dominant form of public culture today, leading us to link virtual space. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but linking up virtual space back to these older ideas of the public, where something like the web is often referred to as the agora by its creators. Twitter is like a town square, and Facebook a type of government. And this is something the graduate certificate will unpack in detail: what constitutes a public, what are these new publics, and what don't we privilege in that kind of discourse around the public. So from the statue in the civic garden or street to the virtual realm of social media and Zoom. Of course, public art means that, you know, in a very simple terms, and certainly the way, you know, the bulk of MAP's activities, for instance, is really to do with something outside of the kind of art world system. So something in the kind of urban sphere outside that. But we do know, you know, and that's something we'll discuss and take questions around that tonight. But you know, we do know that public art is a burgeoning field of practice. I mean, it has been sort of building for a number of years. And proliferating across the world in a variety of forms, whether more traditional forms of sculpture, you know, minor architecture like pavilion architecture, light works, ephemeral works, digital screen-based works, environmental works. You think of the land artists and so on, or interactive works. So it's just kind of names a few. Public art is an interdisciplinary practice. I mean, certainly the way MAP runs it, you know, everyone who works in MAP has studied or is a kind of registered architect, and you certainly need architecture to translate ideas in the public sphere around sort of permanent public work, particularly the kind of percent for art variety, which, you know, we can talk about. But it's an interdisciplinary practice. It you know, works across art, design and architecture, which is why it's so sort of such an important thing to have as a suite of option, as an option in a faculty like ours. And it's traditionally artist-led. We think of memorials and statuary and so on, but increasingly it's a field that is led by teams of people that collaborate together and conceive to realise projects, temporary or permanent. And certainly that's the case with MAP. You know, there are huge collaborative teams like there is in architecture and design, you know, that go towards realising these projects. But it's also true, I think, that public art is a chronically, I don't know if it's misunderstood, but it's certainly a field that that is much more complex than often what is delivered into the world. You have to kind of negotiate the world to get it into the world, that's for sure. And so part of the course is to teach you how to kind of negotiate the sort of bureaucracy and be able to stay in the room with those discussions. Because, for instance, a lot of artists don't like staying in those rooms. They're much more used to perhaps working independently in their studio. So, I mean, that's part of the collaboration. But there's lots of opportunities for public art that are hardly realised. And, you know, that's something we'd like to explore in the course. So, you know, it's often, anyway, we talk a bit more, particularly around percent for art and what is the context around which public art emerges. So why study public art at Monash? Well, we have a thriving research culture. So MAP is one of the research labs at MARTA, and there are a number of others around health, around, reimagining cities, around expansive visions and technologies. And we have a lab called Sensi Lab that is partly in IT and partly with us. So it's a series of labs that really respond to the complexity of contemporary societal and environmental challenges, from climate change and urbanisation to technological change, social cohesion and equity. So that kind of demands integrated, interdisciplinary creative approaches. And these things are an increasing demand. And in fact, public art is precisely those things. It's not always necessarily framed around those ideas, but in terms of collaboration, integrative and interdisciplinary practice, it's right at the heart of that. And also at MARTA, we're experts in studio-based learning. So the delivery of an iterative and collaborative studio methodology, which is really important to the conception and delivery of public art. And indeed, we've had many examples in MAP where we've brought in people, artists who, like the jeweler Manon van Kalsvik, who teaches here, who's never thought about doing public art in her life. And we said, because she had a very particular material practice, we thought, come in and we workshopped ideas for her for this submission for the Southern Way Commission that McClellan Gallery runs, and she got the commission. So we are really expert in how one thinks about and develops in very informal ways, ideas. I think this studio mode that we're talking about, it's a hybrid one. So it's sort of like the fine art studio crib, if you know it, with its potential for disruption. And then the more applied, iterative process of design and architecture. So it's somewhere between those things, I think. And crucially, we have a cohort of staff of some of the most significant artists in the country who are also expert practitioners in the field of public art. So Emily Floyd, obviously many know her work. We recently completed a big public work for her in Sydney through MAP. So her work on the Eastlink Freeway public art strategy, this work that was at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, looks at the history of kind of feminism, and she looks at politics of the 60s and 70s and brings that, into her works, a highly formal practice, references modernity in increasingly sort of complex ways. She's a pleasure to work with. Of course, I work, in public art, my hotel on the Eastlink Freeway. Kathy Temin, who's the head of fine art, has worked in public art. We're doing a big project with her with Glen Ira Council at the moment. It's been going for a few years. This was the first public art work she did. She did a koala tram. Brooke Gurra Andrew, who's an associate professor here. He's done a number of public artworks, and I'll talk about one of them. And is always engaged in the sort of dialogue with the public. And recently, as we know, curated the Sydney Biennale and did it. It was locked down with COVID, but it was an incredible show. Daniel von Sturman, we did a big project with him at the Geelong New Geelong Performing Arts Centre. This painted light work, which was, if anyone knows his videos of dripping paint. He did that with right lights, so I haven't got it here, but there's a video where you can see these colours sort of just slowly drip and fold one on top of the other. And there's actually a number of other people. Spiros Panagiorakis is one that I haven't shown here, and I should, who works with local communities in very distinct ways. So of the 23 staff in fine art, at least 10 of them work in this space. And actually, as most artists should, to be honest. Obviously there are some artists that are resistant, but if you look at, an artist's life, you do collect together various opportunities. There's not just one that sits inside the gallery of the museum. There are a range of things, and increasingly artists do. I mentioned MUMA and their public art program of permanent and temporary work. Agatha Goss-Snape's work here at Caulfield, which is this very emotional map that the business school can look down on and see, and kind of turns these sort of the kind of regulation of mapping into a kind of emotional space of, and it really is a kind of feature work, sort of wayfinding, but a feature work of the campus. Ronnie Van Hout's work, he also, this robot that he did, he also turned that into a work up at Clayton, which I showed earlier, but I didn't point it out, unfortunately, but it's become kind of a, in the one in Clayton, it's kind of sitting, the robot's sitting on a grassy knoll, looking out over the New Horizons building. It's become something of a mascot for the university. Emily Floyd, another work of hers that's a permanent one, well, and one that started off in MUMA in their Ian Potter sculpture court. So they have these commissions, ongoing annual commissions, and then those works get placed in the campus somewhere. So her this place will always be open. It was simultaneously a series of seats, but also a library, and inside there were all these political pamphlets from the 60s and 70s, and she was referring to the history of Monash as a kind of radical campus from the 60s and 70s. James Angus with his beautiful built, unbuilt and unbuildable work. Rose Nolan, whose work, if you know her work, these kind of play with everyday language and phrases. This is in the library, red and white tile, give or take. This work on every level of the new car park building up in Clayton, they commissioned an artist to do one of the floors as a type of wayfinding. Esther Stewart did this one. Kenny Pittock did one, a number of others. And of course, you know, if you go back, Leonard French's Alpha and Omega, which is a very famous stained glass work, you know, installed in the very early parts of Monash's life. As I said, Monash, MUMA and MAP did this, collaborate together to do this conference, Let's Go Outside, Making Art Public. We brought Nicholas Baum from the New York Public Art Fund to speak. And there were a number of others. Jonathan Jones is there, Clothier Bullion, and Brian Martin, who's the Associate Dean Indigenous, the first Associate Dean Indigenous at Monash University. He's a terrific artist as well. And Tanya Bruguera gave one of the keynotes, and the book's coming out this year. So just a few projects in MAP. MAP was established in 2013. It's really the most significant public arts research centre lab in the country, and delivering multiple permanent public art projects, both here and overseas. We've done about 140 projects, or worked on about 140 projects, which is an enormous amount in that time. And the grad cert is going to be taught out of here. So I'll just show some of the projects. This was the project that kicked it off, Monument Park. I worked on this was a collaboration with Oculus Landscape Architects and MCR, McBride Charles Ryan Architects. I worked with Andre Bernice, who worked in MAP for many, many years. So it was an artist-led public project, which is sort of typical of lots of these projects today. And it was a sculptural, architectural and landscape elements packaged into a sort of cohesive, interactive social space. We covered a number of the monuments in the City of Melbourne's collection, the public monuments, public statues, and there what's hiding underneath these kind of concrete blankets, if you like, and then they were broken open to make seats. Innovation Walk, which was a project we did with Kozloff Architecture and Rush Wright, landscape architects, was Andre Bernice and myself working on the entrance of this readapted and failing modernist building at the Clayton campus. So this new facade, this GRC facade, wraps around the old building, which was stripped. And what we did was just kind of lift it up like a curtain and inserted this new portal and this kind of glazed brick facade that's sort of underneath and revealed. Brooke Andrew, as I said before, we worked with him on this project Standing by Tunnerminnerite and Mulbohina. We did this in 2016. And it's the first monument to the 2 Aboriginal men executed in 1842. And it kind of operates as a war memorial to Indigenous people's clashes with colonists. It's sited near the old Melbourne jail. It's a great ceremony and welcome to country when it was open. I mentioned Emily Floyd. This was the project we just completed it's called an open space. In George Street, Sydney, has a really fantastic dialogue with Australia Square with the Solar Wit mural in the foyer there. You can't. We haven't got a photograph of the foyer, but Australia Square is that building just to the left of this. This integrative seating as part of this, really typical of her works. We're doing a project with City of Sydney. A project's been going for a number of years, about 5 years, and a number of us have worked on it, which was to reinvent these old doors fire doors in some of the laneways through the CBD. The laneways in Sydney are not like Melbourne's ones. They are really sort of the back of house. So turning these fire doors into sort of more processional spaces, if you like. And the dialogue is these tile patterns are drawn from different parts of Sydney and sort of meshed together. This is the QV tiling that we've used. This is the carpet from the Sirius building, which is a contested space in Sydney. This is the Opera House tiles married actually to the Solar Whip murals, funnily enough. I won't talk about this one because I'm running out of time. So just the core structure. So there's 3 elements to it. There's a studio, which I'll talk about, of course, in a kind of open way. There's art history and theory unit, which we've written that really looks at what I talked about earlier around, this role of the public, the history of the public, these publics that we can't see, and then there's a suite of electives that you can take. So the studio unit is kind of the backbone of it. So what we wanted to do was give you a brief. So this is an example of a very good brief for the City Centre Laneways project. So not all the briefs are good. And MAP largely works with percent for art in the kind of realm of percent for art. And for those who don't know, percent for art are schemes that have been around for a long time. The first ones in Australia were in 1989. Perth state government legislated that there must be a certain percentage of public and private developments that are devoted to public art. And the percentage varies. You'll find that every state, every major city council has a public art strategy and a public art program. There are a number of smaller councils that can choose to have one. Not all of them do, but there is, in Perth, for instance, I think since 1989, they've spent about $46 million on public art, and there's about 550 works that have come into the city, into the urban realm, which is very significant impact on, the urban realm. So we wanted to give you a brief that was typical of what Matt would respond to inside that percent for art culture, if you like. Now, it's not the only type of a way of doing public art, of course. It's very kind of particular, and it does require, and we want to teach you this, it does require a very specific skill set to kind of negotiate it. The budgets sound big, but actually in reality, they are quite compressed, and you need to be very careful about how you negotiate them. and there are many kind of restrictions that you need to kind of negotiate in order to bring something into the world in this context. But I mean, I was going to say to you that it depends where you come from, what field you've worked in. So if you're a curator, for instance, you probably wouldn't be comfortable getting a brief, which is what this would be, and then sitting through the studio or participating in the studio to develop a public artwork, and then go through all the kind of processes from the EOI to the stage 2 through to kind of final submission, which is what generally the studio would do. But you might want to write a public art strategy that inside a council like City of Sydney that maybe questions what they did, or opens up kind of new opportunities, or finds new ways to get money, or whatever it is. Similarly, if you come from landscape architecture, maybe you're not interested in working in this way, you've got another way of working. So we're open to you telling us. We'll give you a frame, but you tell us what you want to do. So we're happy to give you the context in which to work, but we are kind of very fluid with how this will roll out. So this example of the artist brief was a really good one. It was very evocative. The public art curator at City of Sydney, they have a very good public art team. They have a very good strategy, and the research in it and the things that they were talking around situationism and so on was very evocative and really helps the artist respond. So that, sometimes the briefs you get are very pithy, it's a couple of sentences or a little paragraph and doesn't give you much information at all. And in fact, as artists, you respond to that context in multiple ways. Obviously, there are many sites when we're kind of negotiating these contexts. And the brief really kind of sets that up. So that's a good example. So we would give you a very good brief to work from. Just to show you, the first part of it is this EOI process, expression of interest process, where you sort of throw there's many ways to do it. Sometimes they just invite 10 artists, 20 artists or something, and then they shortlist from that. Or often in the councils, it's an open tender, so anyone can apply. But we just have this and show you Nicholas Mangan. This is a project he didn't get, waiting on one for one of the Melbourne Metros at the moment with Nick. But this is how it kind of looked. It includes, the methodology, how you're going to make it, the concept design, the cost plan, the program, so how long it will take, and so on. So I'll just show you, this is what we do in MAP. Nick makes a particular sculpture this is one thing you can do. It's very particular the way he works conceptually, but he examined the site, but it kind of relates to, he was shortlisted because the curator said, I really love that show that you did. Would you be interested in, submitting for this project? So we included a lot of that sculpture that he did as a kind of context for what he was going to do. So this is what it looks like. You describe the project team, there's a budget, there's a program, there are images of what it might look like at this stage. If you get to the next stage, often you get a chance to refine this further and do more research into it, and so on. There's a kind of material palette, some sort of contextual images and so on, a kind of methodology of how he would cast this object, some construction diagrams. So of course you've got a sense that they feel confident that you can deliver it. It's something that MAP does, give artists, give commissioners confidence that the artist can deliver it. And so, we put all those things in place, but unfortunately you didn't get it. And I'll just show you Daniel's project. This was the first image I showed you. But here's the second one. These are some more of the light in its transition through the colours. And if you knew Daniel's work, he filmed the paint. You can see this diagram down here. He filmed the paint online, and then he transferred the film to the light program using these Philips Color Kinetics Vega tubes, which are used quite extensively. Look, I'll leave it there because I've gone on too much. Oh, hang on, I won't. What am I doing? Sorry. I've got to get to the other courses. I'm just going to go through this because I'm taking way too long here. So the Art History and Theory unit, you'll study the history and theory of public art, investigating public modes of art, design and architecture in the public sphere, the connections between space, place and society, history of spectacle culture from the exposition to the theme park and the event city, and then, as I mentioned, the exploration of notions of public culture, broader ones, from Indigenous culture to the virtual public of the digital age and so on. We have a number of great art historians and theorists here. Luke Morgan, who's the program director of Art History and Theory. Rex Butler, who started Memo Review, which Matt publishes. He can contribute to it as well. And so that's a great course. We'll also have a great unit. We'll also have in that, as we would in Studio, all the people that work at Monash in this sphere will come into the studio and interact with you in some way, whether it's a group trip, whether they come and talk about their work in the Art History and Theory unit. So you'll get the full breadth of everyone who works here interacting with you in some way. If you're a curator, you can work with Tara McDowell or a number of the curatorial lecturers and practitioners and so on. And the elective suite, depending on where you're coming from, you may have the skills, the communication skills to put together a document and a final submission. And of various submissions for public art, or you may not. So we were going to run just a communications unit, but we decided to give you the choice, just like within the studio, to give you the choice of how you want to sort of write that unit depending on your experience. So we are offering you digital modelling and digital publishing units, which sit in design and digital imaging, but you can also do design thinking. We thought straight drawing units would be very handy. I mean, drawing is a great skill to have just in kind of notebooks and stuff, particularly when developing ideas. But also we're going to offer you a number of urban planning units. One is around regulating the city. Another is around just the history and theory of planning and urban design, which we think would be, very interesting for students to study. And that is all from me.
Thank you. I love watching and looking at all those pieces of work, and I feel really privileged to be able to work on Caulfield campus, where we've got quite a number of installations, from Agatha Ghost Snape to your work to Emily Floyd's, and just being able to reflect on them or watch how people interact with the public art. It's fantastic. Thank you very much, Callum. So we've had a few questions come in. So thank you all very much. If you've got other questions, please feel free to type them in now. This is your opportunity to be able to find out more and ask questions from your particular perspective. One of the ones that I might start off with is, we've had a question from Faye, who was asking, within public art and within this course, is it worthwhile pursuing this course in the medium of temporary art?
Maybe I didn't sort of tackle that, but I mean, certainly with Matt, we are engaged largely in the delivery of permanent art and permanent public art. And when you are engaged in that, it does take up a lot of your time because it's so demanding in terms of sort of the regulations, in terms of, the complexities of delivery and so on. I love working in the temporary sphere with public art because it affords you certain freedoms that permanent just doesn't give you, yes, of course, you could do that project that studio project could be a temporary project. You know, Spiros Panegyrakis, for instance, did a very interesting project in Carnegie, a local council there, where they did, you know, it was based around a bus tour. So it was engaging directly with the community, with ephemeral works and so on. So of course, you know, we're open to all the different ways that public art can be realised, but also in ways that we haven't imagined. I mean, that's one thing that I think is really important about this course and all the people that are around it, that what we hope for in this space is that it can become something other than what it is. You know, not just what you how you regard it, and exploring and researching how it's possible to do things in other ways and engage different communities and different audiences. And also what constitutes placemaking, what constitutes, you know, critical practice and so on. So yes, you know, you tell us the project that you're interested in and we'll respond.
Thank you. I think you mentioned it to me earlier when we were having a chat. It's like that ability for you to be able to work with the artist to help realize their own ambitions or practices, especially in this realm. So that was quite good. Thank you. So we've got a couple of other questions here, a little bit around timetabling and course and on campus kind of studies. So I do know that the course date for semester 2 next year, orientation is the 19th of July, and then classes will commence the week after. The other part of that question was how classes might be affected with COVID. I know Monash in general as a university is aiming to have, I think it's like almost 100% of classes on campus next semester.
Yep.
So you'll be able to engage directly. If not, what happens is they do a blended situation where one class might be online. So at least it gives you that ability to maneuver. So Monash is definitely prepared for that, and especially the faculty. One part of that, Callum, was, do you have any idea, or have you sort of settled on timetabling? I know you're kind of finalising it at the moment as to what timetabling and dates things might be. So that might be a situation someone's asking in relation to trying to work out or organise classes in with work. And that's coming from Amanda. So.
Yeah, we're mindful that the community or the cohort is going to be a diverse one, and that people will be, some people will come from their jobs to do this. So I think that question can be answered simply by saying, you know, we'll respond to you. You know, so if you tell us what your job is and so on, we'll try and line up all the ducks so that we'll teach studio on a particular day. We're pretty flexible. You know, the lectures, the art history and theory lectures, you can do those online. You can see them recorded, so that, you know, you can do that in your own time. The elective, well, depending on which elective you do, you will be harnessed to a kind of regulated timeline, but that you've got choice there, or timetable, I should say. But you've got choice there, which will afford you some flexibility. So we're all about flexibility with it. We want to listen to the cohort, where they're from, what communities they're from, what type of practice they're interested in, and tailor it to suit them.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Which is good to know. So one of the other questions that's popped up a few times is, we've got somebody who has come in from New South Wales. Thank you very much for joining us. They're keen to know whether or not there'll be potential for it, the delivery, whether it might be online or if they can come down for intense kind of workshops or residentials. So I know at the moment it hasn't been structured that way, but I just thought I'd open that question up there.
Yeah, I don't think we can do the studio intensively. We could certainly manage the art history and theory units that way, and we could look at sort of, you could certainly do some of the electives that way. But certainly in the studio, there would be the capacity to beam in from interstate, no question, and we could have you on a screen and you would be there online virtually. You know, there's no issue with that at all, and we're very good at doing of that sort of delivery. You know, it's a very small office here. We set up multiple cameras so it can feel kind of intimate. So yeah, there's absolutely no drama for someone from interstate participating. It'd be great if you came down, you know, occasionally and attended. I mean, one of the things that I think is very clear about COVID is, yes, we've all had to kind of manage kind of digital delivery of things, and we do it well, as you would expect, you know, a good university to do that. But I have noticed that, you know, coming back on campus, it's great to be back on campus. It's great to see everyone. It's great to be in the same room. But anyway, I think we can kind of reproduce that. But if you could come down occasionally, it would be great.
Cool. So I guess the key there is that there's an adaptability around working with artists and your schedules and that sort of thing, which is really nice to hear, because it's not always quite that way. Quickly, there is another question that is asking, what is the duration of the course and how many days or what sort of time frame are you expecting people to be sort of on campus and sort of that off-campus research and reading and...
Well, the lectures, the lecture's an hour, should be 2 hours, so it's a 3-hour block. 3-hour block also for the elective delivery, and the studio should be about 8 hours a week, so that's kind of 14 hours contact, and then the expectation would be you'd be doing, that much work again, of course, on at home and on your own. So I mean that's a bit under what one would expect. I think it's possible to do it like that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I mean, there is a question here from Nick I'm looking at, Scott, which is, does this course teach us practically how to produce public art installations?
You just beat me to it. Fantastic. I like that question.
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's a
brilliant question.
Sort of would see a course like this. We're not saying that you can simply transition from this course and go and get public artworks, go and get a public art commission. There's no guarantees in that game. But what we would give you is the kind of practical. It's all about the practical on many levels, because that's why It's Over Studio so important, because there would be a conceptual period like there is with any beginnings of public art. And that's what submissions require, actually. At the EOI stage, you do the conceptual work, and it's a very intense period. You refine it through design development, and after stage 2, if you win the commission and so on. But the idea is already kind of formed, and the commissioners choose the idea. So in a way, post that, it's all about the practical. And MAP, that's the beauty of teaching it out of MAP. That's what we do. We deliver, projects, and we've delivered a lot of projects. And there is no lab like ours that can say they do that, because we've got so many good artists who work in this space, and we are incredibly busy, and we sit around all day talking about how to make something and what's the best possible way. So that was the whole point of showing you the workshops. We have all the kind of workshops that can enable, traditional delivery and non-traditional delivery of work. So yes, we are really, really expert in that sort of thinking, and we would demand that you think through the kind of construction methodology of anything you propose, and to the point that if you couldn't realise it, then you'd be marked down. That's kind of part of the process, to get you to think materially, and that really does inform great work. And if you can work out how to work efficiently with material, and very specifically with material, you go a long way to making something good. So yes, we see that as a very important part of it.
Absolutely. I think
does that answer the question for you, Nick? I hope it does.
She's actually added a part 2, but it is that combination between the making and the thinking. So there was a part 2, which is like, apart from moving through the key stages, is there a second stage where the students actually get to see or be involved potentially in the construction techniques, or engaging with any of the stakeholders involved, such as an engineer? I guess that would depend on what kind of live projects you might be working on at the time.
Oh, well, that's one of the points of doing it inside MAP, because MAP's got all that stuff going on all the time. So part of the conversation, just a kind of informal chat that we could have is around what's on the walls. I mean, I look around here, there's stuff, all the stuff we're doing. So, you can sit in this space and we can talk about it. So, I mean, look, and every public art proposal demands an engineer. You have to have an engineer. You can't put in a public art proposal without having an engineer looking at it and telling you whether it's feasible, because no panel worth their salt will give you a commission if they think that it won't stand up, or they think that it's dangerous. So yes, at MAP we have architects who work in here, but we work with a team of engineers that we always go to. We work with particular fabricators who are expert in particular forms of fabrication. There's a thing called the ACE Lab, which plugs into us, that is helping us realize work regularly. So yes, you would get all that stuff. I mean, a lot of people think that stuff's really boring, but we think that stuff's really, really interesting. What they say, what is it? David Bowie, that song about Andy Warhol. You think about paint, you think about glue, what a jolly boring thing to do. Well, that's what we do. We think about jolly boring things in here, and it can be really fun.
Jolly boring things in like a beautiful context. But yes, Nicole, true. This is to answer Ai Ching's question in the same time, this is a 6-month sort of like intensive study, which Nick, will, yes, give you the framework and the skills and the knowledge to be able to bring public art to rural spaces around New South Wales or anywhere else. Absolutely.
Yeah, Nick, we want you to come because there's lots of bad work in rural spaces as there are in kind of, suburban spaces around Melbourne. So come and we'll show you how to do good ones. And that is a really interesting conversation around how public artwork manifests itself in rural Australia. So,
and how ideas manifest.
There's also some really great things, and actually great things that aren't regarded as public art, that sort of, and so on. So they're all part of the kind of discussion. So yeah, we'd love to have that conversation.
And I think Amanda had asked a question a bit early on how many students do you typically get in the course? It's quite a small and bespoke course, so it's probably anywhere around the 10 mark or something like that, or a little bit lower either side. So the
we'd like it to be small because then the cohort is, it's more like, I do supervising of PhDs and masters. It's a little bit like that. You work closely with someone on their ideas, and it's quite intensive. And I think that's a really fruitful way to kind of develop ideas, in a concentrated way. So yeah, we're happy with a small cohort, definitely.
Absolutely. I'm really conscious of the time, everyone. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to send them in. I'll pop in a link so that you can get more information about public art and also commence the application project. So there's the link for more information on public art, and also it's where you'll find the application form. We should quickly mention, Callum, that with the application, you do ask for a statement and some examples of work.
Yeah. It's very informal. Thanks, Scott. It's a very informal application process. So we want to know where you're from. I mean, in terms of what practice, we want to know, what field you've come from. So it's fine art, curation, landscape architecture design, engineering, whatever it is. So we'd like to know that. And in terms of, we ask for sort of up to 10 images, but, that's very loose. If say you're an engineer, we'd like to see some of your engineering projects. If you're a landscape architect, show us your projects. Same for an artist. If you're a curator, maybe you want to show us some images of the exhibitions, and maybe there's a bit of explication on what they were. So it's very informal. It's 500 words, I think, is what we specified. No more. Don't want a sort of big lengthy statement. Just a kind of general sense of where and sort of why you want to do it, how you'd want to sort of engage with it. And I mean, be mindful of the fact that, you're going into an environment with incredible people working in this sphere. So we do want to know how you're interested and what you think you could get out of, working with those people and with us.
Absolutely. Just the network of academics and artists that work with and align with Monash is great. So the information is in there about the course. So as Callum was mentioning before, please feel free to reach out to him if you'd like to discuss your specific circumstances, because as he's pointed out sort of several times tonight, this program is really about the artist journey and the creative, and supplying you with that knowledge and the framework so that you can navigate through the complex processes around idea to realization of public art, to give you that confidence which is essentially, what this course is about. And there's also that making component as well, which is great for those creatives that are in here. If there's no other questions, I'm just conscious of everyone's time. I don't want to keep people too long, but thank you very much for joining us. It's been wonderful to see everyone tonight. Hope we've answered all your questions. If you have others, please feel free to email us through the link on the public art page as well. Or if you've got something detailed about your application, please feel free to contact Callum directly. Applications are open now, so please feel free to submit those or start the application process. And that way it just helps you get prepared and ready once you've handed that in. Callum, is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off for the evening?
No. Thanks for coming tonight and listening to me bang on. And I'll do lots of that in the course. And it'd be great to, if you wanted to come, it's going to be great and be a pleasure to have you. So, thank you very much for attending tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. I should mention too, Monash Caulfield is an open campus, and with the 3 galleries on site, please feel free to drop in and have a look around. There's some beautiful coffee here. It's just nice to be able to appreciate the public art that is on campus and the galleries as well. And you're always welcome to pop into our student service office, which is just in the main building G area. You can ask for me. My name's Scott, so I can always help show you around or answer any questions that you like, or any of the staff here are available.
Yeah, you should go to Monash University Museum of Art. They have an amazing show at the moment by the Indigenous artist Dale Harding with his mother. It's just one of the most fantastic shows. I genuinely, get along to see that regardless. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for this evening. It's been wonderful to see you all, and hopefully we will see you all very, very soon in the realm of public art and within that MAP collaborative studio. Thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye.
Thank you. We'll chat soon.